Welcome to episode 65 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today our guest host Craig Thomason is chatting to South African angler Barry Wareham.
Hello, Barry. How are you doing?
Craig, I'm good, and you?
Oh, fine, thank you. A little bit frustrated with this lockdown, but hopefully it's coming towards the end. How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, I think it's been tough, eh? Tough for all of us. It's been, there are a couple of aspects to it. The first one, obviously, from my perspective, is I'm in the business. So, yeah, it's been very tough there. It's hard on our staff. It's hard on everybody. And you just wonder how you're going to get back up and on your feet and going again. But that's what we've been doing. We've been working hard at trying to put it all together, and hopefully we're going to get that done. The other one's obviously the fishing. I think for those of us that are passionate about it, it's really tough. It's hard. You just appreciate the time that you actually spend out there, even if you don't get a bite. I'm really going to appreciate that in the future, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I've also found myself spending time going through old pictures and reliving the memories we can't make now while we can't fish.
Yeah.
So you've been pretty busy during lockdown, anyway.
Yeah, I also managed to get my tackle room a little bit more organized and built a little bit of a workshop on the side to move workshop from tackle room, which makes it a bit more efficient when you get home. If you need to build a few traces quickly to go and fish the next day, it's going to be that much easier. So I guess we've all been doing a lot of prepping.
Yeah, that's for sure. We've had some forced admin time, which is good, eh?
Yeah.
Great, Barry. Well, what we're going to chat about is your competitive angling mainly. So if you don't mind, we'll dive right in. And I'm going to start right in the beginning and ask you basically where you got started with fishing, how you got started in the beginning.
Craig, yeah, I guess I grew up on the North Coast, a little town called Darnell, which is a sugar town, got a mill and everything else. It was very close to Singwazi if you had a car. If you didn't have a car, it was a hell of a long walk. But Singwazi was my backyard, and so was places like Siola Point and Ata Bay. And that's pretty much where I grew up. So in the sugar community, you had people at the mill that had come from Sizela and people that had come from Felixton up in Zululand. So the angling community was very strong. And fishing clubs in those days were very strong. And there was quite a strong sort of social aspect to it. There wasn't a lot to do if you were in one of those sugar towns. There was no golf in those days. There was Biscope on a Friday night. And most people fished. I mean, there was a big community that fished. So as kids, it was something that we did whenever we could. But I guess from a competitive point of view, my dad was a member of the Darnell Angling Club. And I just remember being very frustrated as a kid when my parents weren't happy that I go and fish competition because you were going to be out late. And in those days, you fished your competitions from 2 in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night. Every time it was on a Saturday. And there was, as I say, a strong social aspect. But with any fishing, as you all know, there's a competitive aspect, even if it's you on your own. So I guess that's where I kind of got going. And as soon as I was allowed to go and fish with my dad, I just loved it. And the kids that were part of that club were competitive. We used to sort of fish against each other, even though we were big mates. And I think that's where it really started. So it was my grandfather to a large extent, who wasn't really a competitive angler, but it was my love of fishing that actually sort of edged me onto the competitive side more than anything else.
Okay, great. And you took to it really well, Barry. I mean, you've achieved so much in fishing over the years, and you're obviously one of the most respected anglers in the country. I think you've probably achieved more than anyone else. Did you find that the competitive side of angling, were the guys very competitive? Was it something that the guys were hiding secrets from each other, that sort of thing?
No, I think look, it's, as you know, angling is always competitive. So there was certainly a little bit of, you know, um, when you say secrets, guys would perhaps not tell you exactly what they'd caught the fish on, and that kind of thing. But at that level, there was a lot of camaraderie. It was really good, and it was a club outing. It was much more social. But as you sort of move on, the first time I was selected to fish for the North Coast was a sort of a huge honor. I remember my dad being very proud because he'd fished for the North Coast, and he wasn't a hugely competitive angler either. He just really loved his fishing, and did it more for the sake of the club than anything else, I think. So fishing for the North Coast was quite an honor, and I met a lot of guys that had sort of come from clubs in Durban, and some of the legends from the South Coast, the Savills and the Critchlows and those kind of people, and the Thorpes and the Rebecks from Durban. So yeah, I got to meet with a lot of people, and I found that amazing. I learned a whole lot of new tricks because you're always watching to see what other people are doing, and that, I suppose, sort of that got me going. And from there, it was a great honor to actually be selected to fish for Natal. Obviously, once my national service was completed and all that kind of, because that took me away from fishing for a while. But there were very few people that had made it into a Natal team that weren't from one of the top clubs, so to speak. And I'd kind of come from a club in the bush, which made me very proud. And sadly, that club eventually fell apart. There just weren't enough members. I'd moved on. I was living up in Richards Bay. So yeah, when we had to disband the club, I ended up fishing for NCAA in Durban, and there were a whole lot of springbuck and provincial anglers there. So once again, a whole new kind of learning curve, and to do well in a club like that took some doing. So yeah, I've really enjoyed competitive angling, and especially when it got to that kind of level. Once you get to nationals and then internationals, it takes on a whole new dimension. It's very different. Then it becomes very competitive, and I enjoyed that as well, especially doing it as a team. And the one thing that always did bug me a bit was a lot of the tournaments were supposedly team tournaments, but there were certainly quite strong accolades for individuals. And as you know, it's hard to mix the two. It takes a special person to put the team above himself, and that's one of the issues that one had to deal with every now and then with competitive angling.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I'm glad you did. It's an interesting sport from that perspective, because while it is an individual sport to a degree, it's also a team sport. So it must be quite difficult balancing that out. And you get anglers that are brilliant anglers, but they're not team players. And then you know. So I suppose, Barry, that was one of the things that you excelled in. You're a good angler, and you're a good team man.
I'd like to think so, Craig. Yeah, definitely what you're talking about. When I think about it now, I've seen guys that really excel at competitive angling, but deep down inside, the passion hasn't really been there for the fish and for the sport as such. They just do what they know they've got to do well. So they're fiercely competitive. They come into the sport. They perhaps make a provincial team once or twice, and then their aspirations aren't really met. And if they say golf is a great leveler, I think you'll agree, you don't get much better than angling. It's the best leveler I know. But you see these guys come into the sport, and it doesn't take very long, and the next minute he's gone. And you can't believe that somebody that was so heavily involved is not even fishing anymore, and that always amazed me. So I think it's really a blessing to be able to enjoy what you do and to be passionate about it, whether it's competitive or not competitive. It doesn't really matter.
Absolutely, Barry. And Barry, yeah, fishing is a game of chance to a large degree. That's what a lot of people think, anyway. And you know, what separates the men from the boys is having consistent success and doing well on a regular basis. And this is something that you've done over many years. So, what would you attribute your success to? What are your own special superpowers that sort of kind of separated you from the rest of the pack, Barry?
Craig, yeah, I think there's a number of things. For me, first and foremost, I've often seen it in other people. You get people that are quite close to nature, and they will absorb things, and they'll note things, and generally those kind of people make very good hunters. And when you're fishing, you're really hunting at the end of the day. So that passion to understand why and how things happen, I think, is very important. And then something, I used to be a bit of an athlete in my day, and the one thing I learned, I was always told that as a hurdler, I'm far too short. I'll never be able to achieve certain things, and I was quite proud to go on and excel and actually do better than people had said I could possibly do physically. And the only way that was achieved was by actually looking at every single aspect of the sport and seeing how you can improve on everything. And I think there was a book written about it called the Fine Edge, which means just that little bit extra. And if there's 10 things that are very important in whatever you're doing, and if you can just add 10% onto each one of those, at the end of it, you're going to be that much better than somebody else who's only 10% better at half of it. So I think certainly I remember from athletics, it was a matter of breaking things down and sort of saying, this is what I've got to do, and that's where I've got to be. The funny thing is, I don't really remember doing that with angling at all. It was purely passion, and it was passion driven. But I think that training definitely came through, because I knew that, and I learned the lesson a hard way, that if you could cast a long way, you had a significant advantage over other people. To the point where I remember getting very frustrated because my dad used to catch a lot of big cod. And I had caught a few, but I went through a period where I really battled to catch big cod. And one day it dawned on me, all I'd been focused on doing was throwing as far as possible, because most of the time it gave me an advantage over everybody else, including him. But there's a time to do it and there's a time not to do it. So, yeah, at the end of the day, it's really an accumulation of a whole lot of things, whether it's bait presentation, whether it's speed or efficiency, how well prepared you are. There's a whole lot of little things, and I think it's a combination of all of that. But in competitive angling, certainly shore-based angling, casting was definitely one of the areas where you could have a huge advantage. And yeah, I definitely worked hard at being able to do that.
Yeah, well, that's at the end of the day what it's all about, Barry, is practice and hard work, eh?
Yeah.
And Barry, yeah, I mean, you are a natural fisherman. It's something that you love. You have a passion for it. You've already mentioned that, and so it's not just something you did for the competitive side. You did it because you thoroughly enjoyed every minute you spend out there. And I'm sure that the demands of competitive angling must have had some impact on some of the other aspects of angling that you enjoy, because you're obviously tied in to doing a specific type of fishing all the time. And I know that you enjoy all sorts of fishing. You like to throw a fly, you like to throw lures, and those have nothing to do with the competitive side. Did that have quite an impact on your fishing?
Yeah, Craig, good question. I got a bit nervous there. I thought you were going to say other aspects of my life, which it does certainly in family life, and I've been very blessed to have an understanding family. But yeah, it certainly has. I mean, competitive angling certainly took a lot of time away from other forms of angling, and there's a lot of different types of fishing. I just enjoy fishing. It really doesn't matter what it is. There's certain ones that are certain types that I prefer. I love fly fishing. In fact, I think one of my best experiences is being on a river on my own, fishing for yellowfish in particular. Natal scalies I love, and I really love doing that. And it's quite selfish. It's a you on your own thing, and but there's something about it that really just that's invigorating for me. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy. But I would love to have done more of that, especially when I was younger, although we didn't know what we know about yellowfish now. When I was younger, we used to catch them on crabs and little nymphs we used to get out of the sand and all sorts of things. It did, but I wouldn't swap it for anything because I think it taught me a lot and stood me in good stead.
For sure. And Barry, captaining the South African rock and surf fishing team must have been a massive highlight for you.
Craig, definitely. Yeah, it's one of those things that makes you immensely proud. In fact, just for many years when I was fishing competitively and doing very well, there were no national teams selected, and I'd been making the president's team sort of quite consistently, and then they announced the fact that there was going to be a Springbok team selected, and it might well be the last. And I think making that was probably one of the highlights of my career. The unfortunate part was my dad had passed away, and that would have been special. Anyway, moving on from there, yeah, carrying on and fishing in the Protea teams that I did and captaining those sides was very special. And yeah, it's I suppose just, yeah, very proud to have done that and to have been there. And it was certainly a privilege to have been with a lot of those really good anglers. I mean, there's some outstanding anglers that I fished with there.
Absolutely. And Barry, there must have been a number of extra responsibilities that came with captaining the side and some challenges as well. Anything specific that springs to mind?
Yeah, Craig, I think, you know, the hardest thing is, I think, making sure that you've got the right people in the right place at the right time. And each angler in that side has specific strengths and weaknesses that one has to consider. And that for me was always the greatest challenge, because if you were going to fish an area and you knew that this spot was the hot spot, of course, everybody would want to be there, but you can't have the whole team there. So deployment was always quite a contentious issue, and it required some diplomacy, often to the extent where you would, as a captain, take the back seat and say, guys, this is how I see it. There's the deployment. This is what we're going to do. And who do you think we should put here? And who do you think we should put there? And it's nice to get everybody involved, but at some point you've got to make the decision. And that was the hardest part, especially if it involved yourself. So that was always very difficult. And then there was the other side, which was the sort of harmony in the team. Every team, there's different individuals. They're all different. And if you can keep everybody in high spirits and focused on what you're going to do, you're going to be that much successful. It's amazing how, if it works the other way around, and I saw it on countless occasions, especially with opposition teams, it's just amazing how the performance just goes out the window. what they should have done didn't happen purely because they weren't happy. It's that simple.
Pretty much like any sport, Barry. So
Yeah.
happy team is critical, and obviously getting the right person in the job as captain. Now, Barry, some of the other achievements that you've managed to achieve over your career in fishing, you've held some amazing records over the years. Are there some still standing? And what are some of the highlights in your own fishing career?
Craig, yeah, records are quite interesting because I don't know whether it's the same for everybody, but it certainly changed for me. I remember as a junior angler finding out that there were in fact Natal junior records, and I had, I think, a year left to actually attempt breaking some of those. I fished furiously whenever I could, sort of targeting specific records, which I did quite successfully, and I think some of those still stand, both Natal and South African records. As I went on, I started out my competitive angling career as a light tackle angler, which required some sort of special skills in those days, but it was, I suppose, it was like playing in the back line. That's the way the forwards saw it, and those were the heavy tackle anglers. And the light tackle anglers didn't mix with the heavy tackle anglers. So yeah, it was quite interesting to sort of mix the two and try and get a sort of a result from that, because I think I've just, sorry, we were talking, Craig, I got lost a little bit there and sidetracked. We were, what was the original question?
We were talking about the records that you.
So a lot of those records were very important, and those light tackle records I also attacked quite vigorously, and managed to get a lot of those on very light tackle, which I was immensely proud of at the time and proud of my accomplishment. But on hindsight, knowing what we know now about what it does to fish and what we should be doing to fish, it wasn't a good idea. So the heavy tackle stuff was definitely the way to go. And yeah, I moved on, got a few heavy tackle records, but I just found that as I sort of progressed, those records didn't become that important anymore to me. And I was actually just now during lockdown clearing out some stuff in the garage, and I found 2 traces that I'd kept with the intention of claiming a record, because the fish that I'd caught had broken a South African record, and I actually just didn't get around to filling it in and handing it in. So the significance is not what it used to be, is what I'm saying. And for me, it is sad in a way, but I suppose maybe my personality's changed. But that's not what's important anymore. What's important is the fact that it's a good fish, and it's a good fish to catch, and just the memory is important.
Big time, Barry. I couldn't agree more. And then, Barry, apart from your amazing achievements in competitive angling, you've also sort of spearheaded the movement towards spinning in the surf in the KZN coastline. So from the beaches, from the rocky points, throwing lures for game fish, and as braid has come out, and that whole game has developed, you've played a massive part in developing the South African rock and surf spinning. First of all, the equipment, and then also a lot of the techniques come from you. So you've designed rods, you've designed lures, and you've spent a lot of time out there testing these things. That's obviously a massive passion for you as well.
Craig, yeah. Lure fishing has always been a passion of mine. And yeah, in the old days when I was a lot younger, we didn't necessarily have the resources and the wherewithal to be able to buy the right kind of stuff. So a lot of it was homemade. And I used to make a lot of plugs. I used to fish a lot for Garrick with plugs. We fished obviously for whatever we could with spoons, but snook were always quite difficult to catch from the beach. Most of it had to do with distance, but they were still, it was a special fish, as was a kuta. And GTs were also something quite special to me, and I was quite passionate about that. So I guess fishing with plugs for GTs with multipliers and monofilament, and Garrick, you know, at one stage it was Scarborough's, and then I realized how much more efficient a multiplier was, and I went to multipliers. And coffee grinders were something that my father spoke to me about and told me what a great reel it was going to be, with thin nylon and a long thin rod to throw a spoon for snook. I'll never ever forget that. And he mentioned this a number of times, and whenever he went, if we went to a tackle store, he'd say, oh, this would be a nice rod for that. And, you know, but it never really worked because the coffee grinders in those days didn't pack the monofilament that nicely. They didn't throw that well. The monofilament was a little bit thick. And once I started doing a lot of plugging for GTs, and it was all done in multipliers, and I started to see how braid was starting to have an effect globally. I thought, we got to try it. And there were no coffee grinders that actually catered for the stuff. So yeah, it was a long and hard, it happened over a period of time, but it was quite quick. And all of a sudden, one day, it just dawned on me that what I was doing was exactly what my father had said. It's just, he didn't count on braid. And when braid came into the market and we started finding reels that could throw it, we started exploiting that. And then from then on, I mean, I suppose the drop shot era also had quite a bit to do with it, because that's where we really sort of got things going and got people passionate and enthusiastic about lure fishing. And yeah, braid just made all the difference. And now with the different reels coming online and the rods, so it's been very interesting to be part of and to sort of encourage the development in a certain way, because you can see what really works. That's been, yeah, very exciting.
Oh, fantastic, Barry. And you've managed to sort of amalgamate your lifestyle with the thing that you love and your job, and put it all together, and it's going well. Now your son Blaine the apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree there. He's also a good angler. You must be very proud.
I often think about it, and I tell my wife that I'm sure it's my father's revenge. I thought I was bad, wanting to go fishing at all hours of the night and day and doing ridiculous things. But sure, you're spot on, 100% right. Yeah, he's obviously a great little angler, got huge potential. I say little angler, he's not that little anymore. But yeah, he's done extremely well. And I must say it's been invigorating for me, because it's nice to go fishing with your son. I mean, I really enjoy that. A lot easier too, because mom tends to look after you a bit better as well when you're taking the boy fishing. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's been wonderful having him along, part of the journey, and he's very passionate about it and very enthusiastic, and it's just, I can't wait to go fishing with him again soon.
Oh man, I bet, Barry. And talking about that, what if you have the choice to do anything you want the day that they lift lockdown? What sort of fishing do you think you'd like to go and do?
Well, we were supposed to be in Australia at the moment, so we had a few things lined up there, and we were going to do a month of that. Most of it was going to be spinning, and a lot of it up the west coast and up the east coast up to Fraser. But unfortunately, we couldn't do that. This time of the year, just knowing what I know, I think the first thing we're going to do is go and fish for a snook off the rocks. We're going to be throwing a spoon, that's for sure. Either that, or I'm going to be looking for one of those crocs on my fishing ski, because it's that time of the year. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of things I'd love to do, But right now, when this lifts, I'm just hoping it's not going to be too late.
Excellent, Barry. Well, hopefully it won't be too long before you can stuff a whole lot of iron candies into your pocket and go and roam the rocks. But listen, it's been fantastic to chat. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing some of your memories and your experiences with us. I wish I could chat to you for hours, but time is precious. So, Barry, yeah, thanks a million, and thanks for joining us on Sport SA Daily Diary.
Thank you, Craig. It's honestly a privilege and an honor. Thank you very much. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your lockdown.
Thanks, Barry.
Catch tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we'll be chatting to South African middle distance runner Dominic Scott.